Would you help me welcome my good friend, Miss Dottie West?
Before Garth Brooks sold out stadiums and before Taylor Swift owned every chart on the planet, country music had a different kind of royalty. Men and women who packed arenas, stacked number ones, and dominated radio for years before the world quietly moved on without them. Some of these artists scored more hits than most stars ever dream of. Others defined entire eras of the genre, shaping the sound that came after them. Today, we're bringing 15 of them back, because forgetting them doesn't mean they weren't massive. It just means they deserve another look. Number 15, Freddy Hart,
Sexy looking.
Easy Loving. The phrase barely registers today, but in 1971 and into 1972, it was everywhere. On jukeboxes, on country radio, drifting out of every roadside diner from Tennessee to Texas. You couldn't escape it, and nobody was trying to. Freddy Hart hadn't arrived overnight. He'd spent the better part of 2 decades grinding through Nashville before that song finally changed the math. The backstory alone was something. He came up picking cotton in Alabama as a boy, lied about his age to get into the Marines, and washed dishes in honky-tonks just to stay close to the music he couldn't let go of. By the time he walked into Columbia Studio B in Nashville to cut Easy Loving, he was pushing 40 years old, with almost nothing left to lose, and everything still left to prove. What came out of that session didn't sound like anything else Nashville was producing at the time. The production was lean and unhurried, built around a soft, almost hypnotic groove that sat somewhere outside traditional country without reaching for the countrypolitan gloss that was sweeping through Music Row. It didn't try to fit anywhere. It just existed in its own quiet space. And somehow that was exactly right. The Country Music Association took notice. Easy Loving won CMA Song of the Year and Single of the Year in 1971. And then turned around and did it again in 1972, back to back. Hart became the first artist in the awards history to pull that off. The hits kept coming through the early 70s, a steady string of top 10s that filled his touring schedule and built a fan base that showed up year after year.
His shoulders, there's a pair of...
Then the ground shifted underneath him. Outlaw country arrived and changed the entire conversation. Urban cowboy reshuffled whatever was left of the deck, and Freddy Hart, whose sound was too gentle for the Outlaws and too rooted for the pop crossover crowd, found himself caught in the middle with nowhere to land. He never stopped recording. He never stopped touring, but the number ones dried up, the radio doors closed, and the wider world quietly moved on without him. That's the part that stings, because Easy Loving still holds up. Play it today and it sounds exactly like what it always was. One of the most quietly perfect country singles ever committed to tape. The man behind it deserved a much longer chapter than the one he got. Number 14, Donna Fargo, The Happiest Girl in the Whole USA. Even the title sounds like a relic now. Something printed on a novelty coffee mug or stitched onto a throw pillow in someone's grandmother's kitchen, dusted off once a year and put back on the shelf. It carries that faded warmth of a different time, a different tempo, a different idea of what a hit song was supposed to feel like. But in 1972, that song didn't feel quaint. It felt enormous. And it launched Donna Fargo into a spotlight she had spent years quietly working toward, without any guarantee it would ever find her.
Next to me as much as I...
She wasn't a Nashville insider. She hadn't been groomed by a major label or handed a development deal by someone with industry connections. She was teaching high school English in California, playing small clubs on weekends, and writing songs in whatever hours were left over after everything else got done. When she took that track into the studio with producer Donna Fargo in Los Angeles, she was essentially a school teacher with a guitar, a strong voice, and a dream she hadn't quite been willing to let go of. Nothing about her path suggested what was coming. What came was a number 1 country single that didn't stop at the country chart. It kept climbing, crossing over to crack the pop top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, and becoming one of the biggest country crossover records of that entire decade. The follow-up, Funny Face, went straight to number 1 as well. The CMA named her Female Vocalist of the Year. Awards, television appearances, sold-out shows. In 1972 alone, Donna Fargo was simply impossible to ignore. Then the late 70s arrived and brought something no amount of momentum could outrun. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The illness was real, and the fight was harder than most people on the outside ever understood. She kept recording. She kept performing. She showed up when showing up cost her something. But the physical toll was relentless. The momentum had fractured, and country radio, always scanning ahead for the next thing, had already moved on before she had the chance to catch her breath. What she left behind is a catalog of cheerful, warm, fiercely personal music, made by someone who earned every single note of it. The happiest girl in the whole USA is pure, unfiltered joy. And the woman behind it was considerably tougher than the title ever let on. Number 13, Mac Davis. He wrote In the Ghetto for Elvis Presley. He wrote A Little Less Conversation for Elvis Presley. He wrote Watching the Dark for Bobby Goldsboro. Before Mac Davis ever stood in front of a microphone himself, he had already shaped some of the most recognizable recordings of the late 60s. Then he stepped out from behind the curtain and discovered that audiences loved him just as much in person. His 1970 debut single, Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me, wrote a conversational charm and a relaxed, almost winking delivery all the way to #1 on the pop charts. He wasn't a traditional country singer in the hard-nosed mold. He was something looser, funnier, more theatrical. His live shows felt like variety television, and his personality was bigger than any production budget. He got his own variety show on NBC in 1974 and ran it for 3 years, pulling in major ratings and turning himself into a household name far beyond country music. He made movies. He appeared on talk shows. He seemed bulletproof, but the variety show format faded. Country music moved toward a harder-edge sound that didn't suit his style, and Mac Davis quietly transitioned into a career as a performer in Las Vegas and on the touring circuit. He never disappeared. He just stopped being the name on everyone's lips. For a period in the early 70s, though, the man was everywhere, and every note he wrote carried that unmistakable touch. Conversational, warm, and impossible to forget. Number 12, Lynn Anderson Rose Garden.
I never promised you a rose garden.
Hit American radio in late 1970, and by early 1971, it had crossed every border anyone thought country music couldn't cross. It reached the top 5 on the pop charts in the United States. It hit number 3 in the United Kingdom. It charted in Australia, Germany, Ireland, and across Europe. It sold millions of copies worldwide and became one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade. Lynn Anderson recorded it at Columbia's Nashville studios with producer Glenn Sutton, her then husband. And the result was a country record polished just enough to slide through the door of mainstream pop radio without losing its roots. Her voice was bright and direct, the kind that could fill a room without any effort.
There's gotta be a little rain.
She was 23 years old when that record changed her life. What followed was a decade of solid country hits, consistent touring, and real industry respect. She won Grammy and CMA nominations. She worked with some of Nashville's best producers and kept charting well into the late 70s. But by the 80s, the landscape had changed, and Rose Garden had become so ubiquitous that it almost overshadowed everything else she did. Casual listeners reduced her entire career to one song, and even that song started feeling more like a trivia answer than a genuine cultural moment. That's a shame. Because Lynn Anderson was a serious artist with a body of work that holds up, Rose Garden is just the loudest door into a much larger house. Number 11, John Conlee. Rose, Colored Glasses. The title alone tells you everything about the song's mood. A little melancholy, a little stubborn, the kind of feeling you carry around even when you know better. John Conlee recorded it in Nashville in 1978, and it became one of the defining sounds of that era. His voice was rough-edged and warm at the same time, sitting somewhere between honky-tonk and the softer country sound that radio was gravitating toward. It didn't try to be anything other than what it was, and that's exactly why it worked. Conlee had been working as a mortician before making his move to Nashville. He wasn't discovered at a showcase or cultivated by a manager with industry connections. He arrived with life experience behind him and a voice that carried the weight of it. Through the late 70s and into the mid-80s, he stacked up a remarkable run of number ones, including Lady Laydown, Backside of 30, and Working Man. He was a consistent presence on the country charts for nearly a decade, a reliable hitmaker who never chased trends but always delivered. Then the new traditionalist movement arrived, and with it came a flood of younger voices. Conlee kept recording, kept touring, and never veered from who he was. But the wider spotlight had already found someone else to shine on. Those records still sound honest and direct and completely real. For a few years in the late 70s and early 80s, John Conlee was exactly what country music needed. Number 10, Dottie West.
Comes more tears to cry.
Here Comes My Baby. It hit country radio in 1964 and announced a voice that Nashville hadn't quite heard before. Warm and direct and completely unafraid, carrying the kind of lived-in feeling that can't be manufactured in a recording booth, no matter how long you try. Dottie West had come up the hard way, raising herself out of genuine poverty in rural McMinnville, Tennessee. One of 10 children in a household, held together mostly by stubbornness and very little else. By the time she arrived in Nashville in the late 50s, she had already decided that music wasn't a backup plan. It was the only plan. Here Comes My Baby won the first ever CM of Female Vocalist of the Year award in 1964, making West a piece of country music history before most people were paying attention. The hits kept coming through the late 60s and into the 70s. And then Kenny Rogers walked into the picture and changed the scale of everything. Their duet, Every Time. Two Fools Collide went to number one in 1978, launching a commercial partnership that produced a string of charted singles and filled arenas for years. She was recording at Chips Moman's American Sound Studio and working with some of Nashville's sharpest producers, building records that balanced traditional country warmth with a pop accessibility that radio couldn't resist.
Hey, sorry, boy.
She did her own Coca-Cola jingle campaign that ran nationally for years. She was on television. She was selling out shows. At her peak, Dottie West was one of the most recognizable names in American country music. Then the financial decisions caught up with her. Mismanagement and overspending cost her everything she'd built, including her home. She filed for bankruptcy in the late 80s and spent her final years trying to rebuild from nearly nothing, still performing, still showing up, still giving audiences everything she had. In August of 1991, on her way to a CMA awards show, she was involved in a serious car accident. She died from her injuries 5 days later. She was 58 years old, the first ever CMA Female Vocalist of the Year, a Kenny Rogers partnership that dominated country radio, a voice that could carry an arena without raising itself above a conversation. Dottie West deserves to be remembered as exactly what she was, one of the founding mothers of modern country music. Number 9, T.G. Sheppard.
Wild as I can. And
The name itself sounds like a stage name from a different era, which is exactly what it was. Bill Browder became T.G. Sheppard in the mid-70s, and the reinvention worked better than anyone could have predicted. His 1974 debut, Devil in the Bottle, hit number one on the country charts and introduced a voice that felt smoother and more pop-leaning than what traditional country radio was used to. He was handsome, polished, and built for the crossover moment that was coming. Warner Brothers Records recognized what they had and invested accordingly. Through the late 70s and into the mid-80s, Sheppard put together one of the most impressive chart runs in country music history. Last Cheater's Waltz, I Loved 'Em Every One, War is Hell, Only One You. The hits kept coming with a reliability that most artists would trade anything for. He had over 30 top 10 singles. 20 of them reached number one. He recorded extensively at the Sound Emporium in Nashville, working with producers who knew how to frame his voice inside the kind of lush, radio-ready arrangements that defined the era's mainstream country sound. Nothing about his records was accidental. They were crafted to land. But when the new traditionalist movement swept through Nashville in the mid to late 80s, Sheppard's polished pop country style fell out of fashion almost overnight. The charts moved away from him, and the industry followed. 30 top 10s, 20 number ones. and most country fans under 40 would struggle to place his name. That gap between legacy and recognition is genuinely hard to explain. Number 8. Sylvia Nobody.
At a restaurant she won't buy.
Arrived in 1982 with a whispered intimacy that felt nothing like what country radio was playing at the time. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It was close and confessional, built on a hushed vocal performance and a production that left space for the feeling to breathe. Sylvia Kirby had been working as a receptionist at a Nashville talent agency when she was discovered, which is exactly the kind of origin story that sounds like it was invented for a movie, but actually happened. She signed with RZA and began working with producer Tom Collins, who understood that her voice worked best when the production stepped back and let it move. Nobody climbed all the way to number 1. And then crossed over into the pop top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100. For a brief, brilliant moment, Sylvia was the most interesting new voice in country music. Her follow-up singles charted well, and she seemed positioned for a long run.
Miles away, I asked, who's on your mind?
It never quite materialized the way it should have. The pop crossover she'd briefly achieved proved difficult to sustain, and country radio was already cycling toward the next wave of artists. She continued recording through the mid-80s before stepping back from the industry entirely. What she left behind is a reminder that sometimes a single perfect record defines a moment more powerfully than a decade of consistent output. Nobody is still a remarkable piece of work, quiet, restrained, and completely unforgettable. Number 7. Freddy Fender.
I wish you both the best.
Before the Next Teardrop Falls reached number 1 on both the country and pop charts in 1975. Wasted Days and Wasted Nights followed it. You'll Lose a Good Thing charted high. For about 18 months, Freddy Fender was one of the biggest names in American music, full stop. Not just in country, not just in Tex-Mex, in all of it. The road that brought him there was longer and harder than most people realize. He'd been recording since the late 50s, first as Baldemar Huerta, blending border music, rock and roll, and rhythm and blues in ways that predated what would later be called Tejano. He spent 3 years in Louisiana's Angola prison on drug charges in the early 60s, a sentence that derailed his early career at the worst possible moment. When he finally recorded Before the Next Teardrop Falls at a studio in Beaumont, Texas with producer Huey Moe, the result was something that didn't fit neatly into any single box. It had the warmth of traditional country, the emotional pull of soul music, and a rawness that no amount of studio polish could manufacture.
Felicidad.
He won the CMA Single of the Year award. He appeared on national television. He was everywhere. Then shifts in radio formats and changing tastes at the label level began to pull the spotlight away. He continued recording and performing for decades, earning enormous respect among musicians and roots music fans. But the mainstream never came back the way it had in 1975. What he gave that year, though, was something genuinely special, a voice shaped by decades of struggle, finally getting the moment it had always deserved. Number 6. Conway Twitty.
It's been a long...
Hello, darling. 3 words and a steel guitar, and somehow everyone in the room knew exactly where they were. That opening line didn't just start a song, it started a conversation, the kind that felt personal, no matter how many millions of people were hearing it at the same time. Conway Twitty had already lived an entire career before that record arrived. He'd come up as a rock and roll singer in the late 50s, scoring a massive pop hit with It's Only Make Believe in 1958 that put him in the same conversation as Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis. He could have stayed in that lane. Instead, he made a deliberate decision to walk away from pop music entirely and replant himself in Nashville, convinced that country was where his voice truly belonged. The gamble paid off in a way that's almost difficult to process statistically. Between 1968 and 1986, Conway Twitty scored 40 number 1 country singles. 40. That total places him at or near the very top of the all-time list, depending on which chart methodology you use. He had number 1s in the 60s, number 1s in the 70s, and number 1s in the 80s, moving through 3 full decades of shifting tastes and changing radio formats without ever losing his footing. He recorded much of his classic work at Owen Bradley's studio in Nashville, later moving through several facilities as his sound evolved. His duets with Loretta Lynn produced their own remarkable run of chart toppers, including After the Fire Is Gone and Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, turning the partnership into one of the most celebrated in country music history. Together, they won CMA Vocal Duo of the Year 7 times.
So much to me.
His voice was the constant through all of it, deep, unhurried, and carrying a particular kind of intimacy that made even an arena feel small. He didn't push, he didn't oversell, he simply delivered every single time with a consistency that most performers spend entire careers chasing without ever finding. He died in June of 1993 from an abdominal aortic aneurysm, just weeks after what would have been another major touring summer. He was 59 years old, 40 number ones, 7 CMA Duo of the Year awards, 3 decades of dominance across country music's most competitive eras. Conway Twitty wasn't just a country star. He was one of the genre's all-time architects. And the fact that his name doesn't come up more often in those conversations is one of Nashville's most glaring oversights. Number 5, Ronnie Milsap.
I thumb away from LA back.
Few artists dominated country radio the way Ronnie Milsap did through the late 70s and into the 80s. The numbers are almost difficult to process. 6 Grammy Awards, 40 number 1 country singles, CMA Entertainer of the Year, 4 CMA Album of the Year awards. He was blind from birth, a fact that shaped both his musical education. Milsap recorded extensively at his own studio in Nashville, Studio 18, where he worked with producers including Tom Collins and Rob Galbraith to develop a sound that blended traditional country structure with pop and rhythm and blues influences. Songs like Smoky Mountain Rain, There's No Getting Over Me, and It Was Almost Like a Song demonstrated a vocal range and emotional depth that made him nearly impossible to categorize.
I keep on calling.
He crossed over to the pop charts consistently at a time when that kind of commercial flexibility was difficult to achieve. He wasn't just a country star, he was a mainstream artist who happened to live on Music Row. By the early 90s, shifting demographics and the rise of a new generation of hat acts had pushed him toward the edges of radio's attention. He kept recording and kept touring, never losing the vocal gifts that had made him extraordinary. But the industry moved on without looking back. 40 number ones, 6 Grammys. It's the kind of biography that should guarantee a household name. The fact that younger listeners often draw a blank when they hear his name is one of the stranger gaps in country music's popular memory. Number 4, Nenos Muriceric's Crystal Gayle. She was Loretta Lynn's younger sister, which meant she entered the music world already carrying the weight of enormous expectation. The easy story would have been riding that connection. Crystal Gayle did something harder. She built a completely different identity. Her look, the floor-length dark hair that became her visual signature, was deliberately distinct from her sister's image. Her sound moved further into the pop country crossover territory than almost anyone on Nashville's roster. And when Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue arrived in 1977, everything clicked at once. The record was polished to a shine, cut at United, recording in Hollywood with producer Alan Reynolds, who understood how to let her voice float above an arrangement without losing the country feeling entirely. It went to number 1 on the country charts and then crossed over to reach number 2 on the pop Billboard Hot 100. It won the Grammy for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. It was everywhere. Gayle followed it with years of consistent hits, collaborating with Tom Waits for the One from the Heart soundtrack, recording the pop standards, and demonstrating a stylistic range that few of her contemporaries could match. She charted well into the mid-80s and maintained a serious international following, but she fell between categories in a way that ultimately cost her. Too polished for the new traditionalists, not pop enough for mainstream radio, she occupied a middle space that the industry stopped knowing how to market. The voice never changed. The hair never changed. And Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue still sounds like exactly what it was. A perfectly constructed piece of music from an artist working at the peak of her ability. Number 3, Charlie Rich.
It makes me proud. Lord.
Behind Closed Doors dropped in 1973 and immediately announced that something different was happening. The arrangement was lush and orchestrated, the tempo unhurried, and the vocal sitting somewhere between country storytelling and late-night soul. Charlie Rich, a man who had spent nearly 2 decades being almost famous, had finally arrived at the exact moment he was supposed to. He'd recorded for Sun Records in the late 50s, alongside Elvis and Johnny Cash, which should have made him famous but didn't. He'd moved through different labels and different styles, making excellent records that barely registered commercially. He'd been drinking too much and working too hard for too little return for years. Then Nashville producer Billy Sherrill got hold of him and found the record inside him that all those years had been building toward. Behind Closed Doors went to #1. It crossed over to the pop top 20. It won CMA Single of the Year and Album of the Year simultaneously. The Most Beautiful Girl followed it to #1 on both the country and pop charts. In 1974, Rich was named CMA Entertainer of the Year in one of the genre's most celebrated ceremonies.
And when we get behind closed.
And then, on live television that same evening, he infamously lit the envelope on fire when John Denver's name came out as the winner the following year, a moment that delighted some and alarmed others and followed him for the rest of his career. The industry's enthusiasm for him cooled, the hits slowed. By the late 70s, he was drifting. But listen to Behind Closed Doors today and try to explain why this man isn't in every conversation about country music's greatest voices. You won't be able to. Tour number 2, 8, Eddie Rabbitt.
I love a rainy night. I love a rainy night.
Few artists cross between country and pop with the ease and consistency that Eddie Rabbitt managed in the late 70s and early 80s. He made it look effortless, which might be why it's easy to underestimate just how hard the run actually was. I Love a Rainy Night hit #1 on the country chart, the pop chart, and the adult contemporary chart simultaneously in early 1981. That kind of triple chart dominance is extraordinarily rare. He followed it with Step by Step, which repeated the country and pop #1 performance. Driving My Life Away, Every Which Way But Loose, Someone Could Lose a Heart Tonight. The hits came steadily and they came big.
I love to feel the rain on my face. Is the rain.
Rabbitt had started as a songwriter in Nashville, penning Kentucky Rain for Elvis Presley in 1970, before his own performing career caught fire. He recorded most of his signature work at Woodland Sound Studios in Nashville, working with producer David Malloy, who helped him develop a sound that didn't so much split the difference between country and pop as it merged them into something genuinely its own. He was doing stadium shows. He was on network television. He was selling millions of records. Then, in 1985, his infant son Timmy died of a liver disease. The grief reshaped everything. He kept recording, but the commercial momentum had broken, and the industry's attention had turned toward the new faces arriving from Texas and Oklahoma. He died in 1998 from lung cancer at 56 years old. The triple #1, the crossover run, the songwriting legacy. Eddie Rabbitt was one of the most complete artists Nashville ever produced, and somewhere along the way, the world forgot to keep saying his name. #1. Barbara Mandrell. In 1980 and 1981, Barbara Mandrell won the CMA Entertainer of the Year award back-to-back. She was the first artist to win it in consecutive years. She had a variety television show on NBC, Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, that drew enormous ratings. She played multiple instruments with genuine mastery: steel guitar, banjo, saxophone, bass. She sold out arenas. She was, by any reasonable measure, the biggest female star in country music. She'd been performing professionally since she was a preteen, playing steel guitar on touring shows for performers like Patsy Cline and Johnny Cash. By the time she started recording seriously in the late 60s, she had more experience on a live stage than most veterans twice her age. Her 1979 single, If, Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right demonstrated exactly what she was capable of. A vocal performance of genuine emotional range over a production that straddled the line between country and soul without ever losing its identity. Her work at Columbia's Nashville studios with producer Tom Collins gave her a consistent commercial platform through the late 70s and into the early 80s. Then, in August of 1984, she was involved in a serious head-on collision. The injuries were severe, and the recovery was long and painful. She returned to performing and recording, but the interruption had cost her the momentum that had made her unstoppable. Country radio had moved on. The network show was gone. She wrote honestly about the experience in her memoir, facing the reality of what she'd lost and what she'd had to rebuild. The grace and toughness she showed in that recovery were consistent with the work ethic she'd carried since childhood. Back-to-back Entertainer of the Year, a network television franchise, a multi-instrumental talent that would have been remarkable in any genre. Barbara Mandrell was country music royalty at the top of the industry, and she deserves to be remembered exactly that way. That wraps up 15 country stars who ruled the genre and then faded further from memory than their talent ever should have allowed. Some of them were taken down by tragedy. Others were simply left behind when the industry turned the page. A few fell into the gap between categories, too country for pop and too polished for the traditionalists. But the records survive, and records don't lie.